On behalf of Namita Gokhale, William Dalrymple, and all my colleagues at Teamwork Arts, welcome back to this edition of JLF's Brave New World. A magazine partner for the series is The Week, Journalism with a Human Touch. Today, even as there's much drama unfolding all the way in the West in the United States, we go ahead with our first session of the day, Sex and the Supreme Court. Justice Madan Lokur, Ritu Dalmia, Saurabh Kripal in conversation with Namita Bhandare. The Supreme Court of India has in recent times set on a path of progressive societal reform. Sex in the Supreme Court, How the Law is Upholding the Dignity of the Indian Citizen, edited by Saurabh Kripal, is a collection of narratives that provide insight into landmark judgments that hold the rights and liberties of sexual minorities and women in India. Justice Madan Lokur is a retired Supreme Court judge. Saurabh Kripal is a lawyer and LGBTQ activist. Ritu Dalmia is a renowned celebrity chef and restaurateur and has stood up vigorously for LGBTQ rights, and well-known journalist Namita Bhandare, who writes on gender and social issues. They discuss together the societal and political process that led to these crucial judgments and the role of the highest court in maintaining the dignity and privacy and safety of all of its citizens. Justice Madan Lokur served as a judge at the Supreme Court of India from 4th June 2012 to 3rd December 2018. He is presently a judge in the Supreme Court of Fiji and the only Indian to be appointed to the Supreme Court of another country. Ritu Dalmia is one of India's most celebrated chefs and restaurateurs. 1993, at age 21, she set up Mezzaluna, which certainly used to be one of my favorite restaurants in Hoskas village. In the year 2000, she opened her first Diva, followed by Chittamani, her eatery in Milan. The third outlet, Viva, which is the brainchild of chef Viviana Versace, is one of the most critically acclaimed establishments in Italy with a Michelin star to its name. She's co-authored three books, Italian Khana, Traveling Diva, and Diva Green, a vegetarian cookbook. Saurabh Kripal read law at the University of Oxford and did his master's in law at the University of Cambridge. A self-described accidental activist, is also a trustee of the Nas Foundation Trust, the NGO that first fought for decriminalization of homosexuality in India. He's the author of the recently released book, Sex and the Supreme Court, an anthology about issues related to law, gender, and sexuality. In conversation with Namita Bhandare, an award-winning journalist with nearly 30 years of reporting experience for various publications, 2013, she was appointed India's first gender editor for Mint newspaper and remained in that position until 2016. She's at present an independent journalist who writes a fortnightly column on gender for the Hindustan Times and also writes for Mint, India Sped, and Foreign Policy. All our sessions, ladies and gentlemen, that have been broadcast till now, as you know, are available on our Facebook page, JLF Litfest, and on our YouTube channel, Jaipur Litfest JLF. Please do remember to ask questions and comment by typing it into the comment section below, and we will send these to Namita to ask of our wonderful panelists. And in case any of you drop off due to bandwidth issues, you can find us on our Facebook page and YouTube channels. And as you know, if we drop off, just hang in there and we'll be right back. Ladies and gentlemen, Sex and the Supreme Court, Saurabh Kripal, Ritu Dalmia, Justice Madan Lokur in conversation with Namita Bhandare. Welcome, and over to you, Namita.
Thank you so much, Sanjoy. I cannot tell you how much it means to me to be here amongst old friends in these new and uncertain times. That was a wonderful introduction. I think the only thing missing was the drum roll, but be that as it may. So when Saurabh asked me to write a chapter for his upcoming book, and he was pretty sure about the title from day one. I think before he got the authors, he had the title. And he said it's going to be called Sex and the Supreme Court. And he wanted me to write on workplace sexual harassment and the law, the posh law, the workplace sexual harassment law, and India's Me Too movement. And if you know Saurabh at all, he brings a certain dedication, research, scholarship, and I think above all, a certain flair to whatever he does. A very hard man to say no to. And I'm sure my fellow authors would agree with me. But it took me all of 4 seconds to say, yes, I'm in. And here we have the book. Um, Despite its somewhat provocative title, or perhaps because of its provocative title, there's a misconception that sex in the Supreme Court is only about Section 377 and LGBTQ rights. It is, of course, but it is a lot more. You're looking, I think what Saurabh does as the editor is looks at a streak of judgments, if I can use that term, that emanated from the Supreme Court in a relatively short period of time that touched upon some of the most intimate aspects of our lives, our very identities. Who are we? Our sexuality, our gender. So whether it was Nalsa and transgenders, Justice Madan Lokur wrote that chapter, whether it was adultery, written by Arundhati Katju and Menika Guruswamy. Ritu's chapter is one of the most moving chapters, talking about coming out and why she, and we'll, of course, I don't want to, no spoilers here. We let Ritu talk about her chapter. So from Nalsa to Triple Talaq to Sabarimala to Hadia and adultery, and of course, workplace sexual harassment, these were significant judgments. And sort of, let's get started with you. What led you to write the book? And don't say it was the title that struck you. I mean, what really was the thought process behind this book?
Well, it's like the tail which is wagging the horse, probably was. No, but I thought it was important. We live in an age of misinformation. We decry the fact that mainstream media gives all kinds of information which is available. Social media has unfiltered information that comes from all kinds of sources. And one of the most important things, I think, in a democracy, especially today, is that the citizen must be aware of what is actually happening around her. And how does a citizen get information about the law, about judgments, about really everyday matters that affect him or her, other than through the media, really? There are very few sources. So that's why I felt necessary to write a book that familiarized the average citizen, a lay person. So this book is written for the lay person, right? To have access to a set of legal writing written by, of course, lawyers, but in an easy language. It's not a legal textbook. It deals with issues which are very, very deep, deeply concerning each of us. It concerns our very identity as human beings. So the book is divided into 4 chapters. It deals with community, with religion, with workplace, and of course, your identity. The intention was to make a set of essays which are accessible, really, to the layperson, and not only legal essays. You see, it's one thing to say that this is what the law is, and then you're speaking to the person and examining and explaining something to them. This was not an attempt to give a lecture. This was also an attempt to analyze as to how these judgments have impacted the lives of the people who they were meant for. And what is that which caused these judgments to come around? So that's why we ask people like Ritu and Zainab and other people, Keshav Suri, who have written chapters about their experiences in their lives, and to tie it up as to what is it that the Supreme Court has decided and what is the impact it has had on their life. But ultimately, the intention really was, Namita, to make each of these chapters, each of these issues accessible to the layperson and put it in a context as well. That was also very important. The context, I think, was probably, and that is what gives rise to the name of the book, Sex in the Supreme Court. The context is that in the Indian Constitution, there is a primacy that has been given to the individual above any demand of the community, above any demand of religion. And that's especially important today, I think, in today's day and time, to understand that when there is a braying mob asking for a certain particular view, the Constitution will guarantee protection to the individual. And ultimately, the sole person, the real authority who is supposed to protect the constitutional rights of that individual is the Supreme Court. So the Supreme Court, as the guardian of the fundamental rights, protects the individual in the constitutional scheme of things against demands of the majority, against demands of the community. And this was an intention really of this book, and hence the subtitle, really, the long title, How the Laws Upholding.
I'm very sorry, but I'm going to interrupt you here because I was actually going to talk about the subtitle, and I want Justice Lokur to really weigh in on that, because the subtitle, I mean, of course, there's Sex and the Supreme Court with the dazzling kind of title, and then the subtitle, How the Law is Upholding the Dignity of the Indian Citizen. So Justice Lokur, I want you to please come in and weigh in on recent events in the Supreme Court and in the higher judiciary in terms of protecting what Saurabh calls the rights of the individual. Do you think the higher judiciary has acquitted itself with honor in terms of protecting the right to dissent, the right to protest, the right against arbitrary arrest? Would you like to weigh in on this?
Yes, thank you, Namita. You see, it's like this. I think the Supreme Court has gone through a particular phase at one point of time. And that's why, you had these judgments of Hadia, Nalsa, and, all these cases that are, some of them are mentioned over here in this book. That was a particular phase when the Supreme Court was, I think, a little more liberal than what it is today. But today, I think in the last maybe about a year or 2 years, the Supreme Court has become extremely conservative. And one of the reasons, I think, was the sexual harassment case in which the former Chief Justice of India was involved. I think that has led the Supreme Court to kind of get reserved. And when it comes to something which the Supreme Court does not like, or which the state does not like, in terms of dissent, for example, they just suddenly clam up. And in terms of protecting the rights of the citizens, if you compare what's happening today in the last 2 years with what happened before that, for 2 years before that, I think there's been a sea change. And today it is difficult to say that the Supreme Court is actually protecting the rights of citizens when we are talking about things like habeas corpus petitions and so on. I would be kind of surprised, if some of these cases came to the Supreme Court today. If Hadia's case came up today, or if the Nalsa case came up today, I would be kind of surprised if we got the kind of judgments that we got at that point of time. So yeah, there has been a sea change. Well, not so good, but yes, there has been.
So personally, how do you respond to that? I mean, does it make you sad because you were once part of this exact same institution, this great liberal upholder of what you describe as a phase of liberalism?
Yeah, I am very sad. I am very sad about it, and in fact, I have written a couple of articles about this. It's more tragic than sadness, because the Supreme Court was going in a direction where it was looking after the interests of the people. Fundamental rights are important. The rights of the people are important. And then you suddenly go into reverse gear, and you wonder why. What is it that has happened that has made the Supreme Court go into reverse gear? That I find to be very tragic, and well, I'm certainly not happy about it at all. But I suppose one has to live with it.
Sure. Justice Lokur, I will come back to you on how perhaps this trend can be reversed and whether it's cyclical, but I want to bring Ritu in, if you don't mind. And Ritu...
You couldn't wait, Namita. You couldn't wait.
I never can. So Ritu, yes, Ritu, despite all bravado, I have known you now since your Metzel Luna days. I think that's what, 20 years. I hate to say this. And
When you were
my
young,
question,
let's put it this way.
when I was younger, and you were younger too, my question really is that I know you as quite a private person, and yet you kind of just put yourself really out there with the petition. And I don't know what it took, but it must have taken a lot. Would you like to talk about it and why you did it? Why you joined this petition?
So, Namita, as you correctly said, I am a very private person and I'm a very shy person as well. And so, for me, for many years before this petition, I'll be very honest with you. I mean, I came out of the closet very early in life. It wasn't a big difficulty for me, as you may have read. My mother accepted it very well. Yet, it was not something I liked to discuss publicly because my private life or who I sleep with was something which was my life, which not everyone needed to know about. And in 2007, I went for the first time, I went for a Pride March. I'd never been there before. There was this young girl called Leslie Estevers, who used to be the editor of Outlook that time, who insisted I go for it. And whatever I could do, whether it was donations to NAS Foundation, etc., I did my bit, but I never wanted to be in the limelight because I'm a chef. And more than anything else, I wanted to be known for my professional skills and not who I sleep with. And then I have to admit, my current partner, made a very nasty remark one day when in 2013, the Supreme Court overruled the high judgment. And I was sitting and moaning, bitching people about it yourself, don't have any business to complain about it. And that was really below the belt, Namita. And it's somewhere, it stayed there, that just talking about it is not enough. Just complaining about it in our nice drawing rooms with a group of friends drinking fancy wine is not enough. If we don't do our little bit, we really have no business to complain. And after that, Menaka and I were on a flight back from Goa to Delhi. She was taking care of some other case of mine. And this discussion started about the case and, that how come that there have never been any so-called LGBTQI person themselves who would file this petition. And she just asked me, if we do this, will you join in? I didn't even think. I just said yes. I regretted it later. I have to admit, I'm very shameful about it. But I had not second thoughts, third thoughts, fourth thoughts, fifth thoughts. I mean, my company people, my lawyers in the company, they said, you can't do it. The minute you announce it, you are technically, calling yourself a criminal. You're admitting to a criminality. We don't know whether you can still remain on the board. I mean, my parents, they said, okay, we have supported with everything else, but this year. So there were many moments when I regretted it, but I have to admit, the day the 2018 judgment came in, I think everything was so worth it, Namita. And I always say I think I'm not a humble person and I like to, play my own drums and loud and clear if that's possible. I've done amazing things in my life. I'm very proud of so many things, of my restaurants, but there's nothing that beats the pride and the joy of actually getting the honor of being one of the petitioners. The reality is the petitioners didn't do much. Let's also face a few reality. The real, how shall I say, this war was fought by this team of lawyers, the guy who threw me out of the courtroom many times. That's another story for another day. So it's really the team of lawyers who actually work. Our name will go down somewhere as one of the fellow petitioners for the 377. So it's really something I'm very proud of. Will I do it again? Not even a second I need to think about. I don't think I will regret it for a second.
I don't know. I've lost Ritu. I don't know.
She's speechless now. She can't say
I think
anything.
we've lost.
No, I lost you for a minute. I lost you. Actually, I am speechless. Your chapter is the one that actually moved me, and I was quite teary-eyed when I read it, especially the parts where you talk about you were suddenly, you were this celebrated chef, and suddenly you started getting hate mail, and somebody spat at you at the airport, and so it's. I think you're underplaying it when you say that you did nothing because you were just the petitioner. You put yourself out there, and it takes a lot of courage to do that. I cannot even imagine how much courage it takes. Saurabh, if I can bring you in as well, how difficult has it been for you to balance these two aspects of your identity? The fact that you are gay and the fact that you are also a lawyer in a fairly conservative profession, and as Justice Lokur pointed out, perhaps a profession that is getting even more conservative. How difficult has it been for you personally?
Well, speaking of myself personally, at least when I started my career, I wasn't really out to very many people. But this profession, like any other, is hidebound by class and by the old boys network. So let's be clear about that. So a lot of what I have accomplished and achieved today is not because of my own outstanding ability, which of course, as you people know, that there is. But flippancy aside, a large part of I had protection because I came from a certain section of society. I came from a family with a legal tradition, and therefore when I entered it, I had automatic protection. And as I was working and I carried on, I really felt that it was important for me, with all the privilege that I had, to come out as a gay lawyer, not merely for my own self, right? It's of course important for each person to identify with their sexuality because it frees you. I think any queer person who has come out recognizes that and realizes that. But I was also in a position of authority and power, and I felt it necessary to come out and be somewhat of a role model to a large number of the queer community, the lawyers who are out there. And also by virtue of the fact that I had access to sensitize at least some part of the judiciary, some part of the legal fraternity, that a gay lawyer doesn't have horns on his head. I'm as human as anybody else. My competence must be judged on the basis of my work and not on the basis of my sexuality, really. And that's something that Ritu alluded to earlier. I'm a lawyer who is gay. I'm not a gay person who's a lawyer, right? So of course, it wasn't really very difficult for me because, as you said, I came protected with a baggage of caste and class. I think I've suffered somewhat, and I've spoken about it recently about the fact that my name went as was proposed for judgeship at the High Court. It's hanging fire. It's always the bridesmaid, never the bride. But that, I think, has something to do with my sexuality. But that's also important because a glass ceiling doesn't shatter in a day, right? You have to chip away at it. People like me who... Yes. Sorry, Namita, you were saying something?
I mean, do you have any evidence that it's because of your sexuality? I mean,
well,
lack
of evidence.
Well, look, the Supreme Court Collegium is not exactly transparent, right? And I think the person who can answer that is Justice Lokur right there. So let him speak.
Yes. Justice Lokur, would you like to come in? And
yes,
in fact, a larger question, one would be Saurabh's own case, but the larger question really would be the problem of representation, which is who represents the Supreme Court. It's upper caste male. We make such a noise about Parliament having only 14.5% women, but Supreme Court has just 2 women judges. That's what, 6%? And the higher judiciary, high courts as well. And it's not just gender, but it's also in terms of sexual orientation. It's also in terms of caste. It is not a representative body.
Yes, you're right. But, I think if you look at judiciaries across the world, of course, you do have, women judges in different parts of the country. But how people get to the Supreme Court is very different, right? I was in a program the other day, and there were 2 judges from Europe. And one of them said, which the other one did not disagree with, one of them said that there are 50 countries in Europe and there are 50 different ways of appointing judges, right? So how judges are appointed is, something which is a matter of debate and which can be discussed at a different point of time. So therefore, you have, things like, representation of women, for example, or representation of persons belonging to scheduled castes or persons belonging to scheduled tribes. So these are matters of discussion. But coming back to what Saurabh, I know that it has something to do with his sexuality. It is, I know it as a matter of fact, so, but the Supreme Court, at least when I was there, said, all right, we are prepared to consider him, let's get a particular report and we'll consider him, certainly. But like I said, it suddenly became so conservative, and I mean, his case has not even been considered for 2 years, right? So I have no explanation for that, except the fact that it has become conservative and just clamped up, kind of thing. So yes, it is a matter of his sexuality. I have no hesitation in saying that.
Mm-hmm. How a loss, I would say, a loss.
Definitely.
Complete.
Okay, loss for the constitution, for the judgeship, but gain for people like us. We'll have Saurabh as a lawyer.
I'll just jump in there.
You'll have other lawyers. You'll get lawyers, but it's high time the judiciary just became, and it's not just representative in terms of gender, but as I said, representative in terms of people of sexual orientation. In fact, as Justice Lokur points out in his chapter on Nalsa and on transgenders, one of the impacts.
No, I agree.
Yeah, one of the impacts of the Nalsa judgment was that India got its first transgender judge in lower judiciary, but we have a transgender judge. So, things open up. Justice Lokur, I'd like to stick with you a bit. And I want to ask you really a question about the gap. In Nalsa, you're very clear. When you're writing about Nalsa, you talk about a very progressive judgment and all the wonderful things that followed that judgment, how things opened up, states adopting policies, starting with Kerala. And then Parliament brings in the law, because obviously it is not the job of the judiciary to legislate. So Parliament brings in a law which is 2 steps back. I think the same thing has happened with the Vishaka guidelines and with the POSH Act, where justice is just not being seen to be delivered. And it's not just to do with former Chief Justice Ranjan Gogoi, but it's also to do with how the Sexual Harassment Workplace Act is working out on the ground. Women feel that they are not getting justice. Men are filing criminal defamation cases. This all has a chilling effect. So we're in this very complicated situation. The judiciary should not be making laws, but the laws, when they come in, tend to be very populist or tend to be reactionary or tend not to deliver. How do we get around that?
Yeah, you see, there are 2 things that are involved. One is, does the legislature, Parliament in this case, does it act in time? Now, the judgment in Vishaka's case came in 1998 or 1999, right? But the law came in 2013. Okay, that's 14 or 15 years later. Why did Parliament take 14 or 15 years to legislate? All right, there's no answer to that. Now, when you have a situation like that, what is the Supreme Court supposed to do, or what is any court supposed to do? And if a woman is sexually harassed at the workplace and she comes to the court, is the court supposed to say that, listen, we're not supposed to legislate, okay? Parliament is not legislating. So if you get sexually harassed at the workplace, what can we do? What happens to the fundamental rights of that person? That is the question. So there is this interplay between, the legislature not acting and therefore compelling the Supreme Court to legislate. And then when the Supreme Court passes a judgment like they did in Nalsa, then it prompts the legislature to come out with a law, and that law may turn out to be inadequate. And it has been challenged. The judicial officer that you mentioned, she has challenged the law, and there are others also who have challenged the law. So, these are things which it's very difficult to balance, the role of the Supreme Court and the role of Parliament in certain situations. But I think if the Supreme Court continues to be progressive like it was, the legislature will have to wake up and look into many of these issues. So many of them. I mean, the transgender law, for example, is there are defects in it. There are defects in the Sexual Harassment of Women at the Workplace Act. So somebody has to do something about it. And if the legislature does
Would
not,
you tell me what are the defects in the Sexual Harassment Act?
well, for one, one of the things that has been debated for a long time has been this issue of private organizations. So if you have sexual harassment in a private organization, what do you do? What do you do if there is no sexual harassment committee? Okay. Now there were, and I think there still might be some high courts which do not have a gender sensitization committee. What do you do about it? I mean, are you going to call up the Chief Justice and say that, listen, you're violating the law, right? Training. I was a member of the Gender Sensitization Committee in the Supreme Court, and we had to go undergo training to implement the law, because we got a couple of complaints. We didn't know how to deal with them, and we had to undergo training. So there are a whole lot of things that are involved. It's not just making a law and saying, all right, it's there. Transgender law, for example, these boards, welfare boards, they're not there in every state. What do you do?
Mm-hmm. Correct. I'm getting cued that we've just got about 5 more minutes. So I would like to come back to Ritu. And Ritu, I want you to tell me, how did the 377 judgment change your lives? Because we're talking about judgments and we're talking about lives on the ground. How do judgments change lives? And of course, you've also mentioned your privilege, just as Saurabh has just mentioned it a short while ago, but you've written about it. You've talked about a couple in Jharkhand who were beaten black and blue. You've talked about a woman in another, I think.
Hear you.
Yes. So can you hear? Ritu, can you hear?
No.
I just want you to. Okay. Let's carry on. I'm really sorry, because I wanted to hear from you on how the judgment changed your life and the lives of others on the ground. Did you get that?
Yeah, a bit of it. So I will try to answer from whatever I could get. First thing, as I'm here, so I'm not such a private person anymore. I've never come and spoken about it on a public platform or any platform at all. But I'm doing that today because I've also realized it's very important to talk about it. It's very, very important. Even if 2 people hear this, or even if it makes an impact on 2 people, the purpose is solved. So that's one very big change that has happened. Earlier, I used to say that this is it, after 377, now it's past, my job is done. And now there are a lot of young kids who are going to take it forward, because this is the first baby step that has happened. And there's still a very, very, very long path ahead. But what's also changed is that you can't really just say, okay, I've done my bit and it's over. Because once you've done it, you've opened a Pandora's box, and you, whether like it or not, you're involved in it for the rest of your life. You talked about the hate mails I got, but what's the most beautiful part, which is the love mails I got, the beautiful emails, messages that I got after this case was won, by people in small states, by people in villages who said how it has given them the courage to actually accept it. And for me, as I said, that's the most beautiful gift that I could have really ever received. Also, what I realized is not only because of this case, but also because of the book, this amazing book that has this beautiful, I feel like a fraud with my chapter in it after reading Namita's chapter and everyone else's chapter. was, I always thought that my workplace was a very liberal workplace. It was a very fair workplace. And I had all the right rules set, that there'll be no discrimination between gender, sexuality, etc. But I also realized that you may set the rules, but it never really gets implemented at lower levels. Because you may set the rule, but the most important thing that is needed is to change the mindset of the people who are going to follow it. So for us now, it's become very important. And what we have started doing is,
I think we've lost both Ritu and Namita just now.
I think Ritu's back. Ritu, did you want to finish that? Ritu, can you hear us? Ritu, we are on mute. You're still on mute.
I said Namita was anyway not interested in hearing what I had to say. So I will shut up now.
Namita, you're on mute.
Wow, technology. Okay, I know we are out of time, and I know I need to start with audience questions, and I'm not getting that little window above in case I don't know where it's gone. I'm going to give the last word to you, and then I'm going to open this up completely to audience questions. What are the next frontiers? I feel you're already ready to write your next book. I think the recognition of same-sex civil unions, I mean, whether you want to call it marriage or whether you want to call it something else. I think marital rape. I mean, I think these are areas where the Special Marriage Act, you have two governments talking about bringing in laws against love jihad, despite the fact that the Home Minister has said that there is no evidence of love jihad. He said this in Parliament, and yet two governments talking about bringing in act. So I think we need to get, no matter what mood the Supreme Court is in, are we going to talk about these new frontiers that we need to open up?
Well, Namita, it's a very dangerous time. Justice Lokuru is absolutely right. When you're a lawyer, you have certain strategies. You choose your battles and you pick your battlefield. You do not want to litigate a matter when the court is going to be conservative. I don't go to court so that I lose, right? I choose to go to court because I want to win. So there are a lot of battles we have to fight. We have to fight a battle for gay marriage. There'll be activists who will be split about it, but I think this is what the people of the community want. There are anti-discrimination battles that have been fought both on behalf of virtually every, it's a question of intersectionality. So women, transgender community, the scheduled caste, there are battles and battles to be fought. Challenges are enormous. The Indian Constitution guaranteed equality to women in 1950. We are today in 2020, 70 years hence. We can't say that a formal expression of equality in the Constitution 70 years ago has given equality to women today. So you need to go back to court, you need to go back to Parliament constantly. But you have to choose when you go and where you go. So I must say the terrain today is not the most conducive for us for some of these battles. But that doesn't mean you completely sit back, because I don't know how long it will take for the terrain to improve, right? So you have to put your faith in judiciary and God. And I suppose we call judges my lord because they're godly.
Let's not take that too literally. Okay, Saurabh, I'm sorry, but I'm going to
that's
very rudely. Yeah, because we've got a question here from Anjali Verma. I don't know who this is addressed to, but let me ask the question first. You talk about gender sensitization at the workplace. I think this is for Justice Lokur. Do you see any reforms being made for LGBTQ representation at the workplace? Who would like to take that?
Yeah. I think they should be. They should be. Why not? In fact, this is one of the issues under consideration. That what about sexual harassment of LGBTQ community? It is very important, by the way. Let me tell you that it is very important and should certainly be considered. Yes.
Correct. Ritu, I know you have in your business, you have made space for greater representation. I think the question was to do more with LGBTQ representation at the workplace. Would you like to explain and tell us a little about the steps you are taking?
So, listen, for me, it's very simple. I mean, the workplace is open to everyone. There is no discrimination between, I would not like to discriminate against the straight people. Let's put it this way. They are nearly as good as we are. But it's by chance or by luck, we had a lot more LGBTQI applications coming to us because they felt it was a safe workplace for them since it was headed by someone from the community. So we have always chosen, and we have had a lot of people from the community who have been in the industry with me for years. And honestly, I don't know, I shouldn't say it. It's completely politically incorrect thing to say for whatever reason, and I may get into a lot of trouble for it. But they're amazing people to work with because they don't have these hassles of going home at 5:30 to take care of 6 kids. Okay, so I mean,
As yet,
in some
but
ways,
you
it's
never
really,
know with
really
Dave
wonderful. Yeah, exactly.
having.
But
Correct. Okay, there's
yes,
another
but
question
as I was
here.
telling before, which I think I got cut off, is one thing we realize.
Ritu, I'm going to ask another question. I have another question here from Sanya Bhutani. She wants to know about the intersection of the queer movement with other movements and communities. I think that's a very clever question, the kind of creating a larger conglomerate of activism, with the feminists, with Dalits, with Kashmiris, with environmentalists, and with all the supporters of a secular India. What do you say to that?
What fun. I can't wait. I want to be part of it. I think there will be so much drama. There will be so much theater. Life will never, ever be boring again. That's for sure.
Correct.
I mean, just jump in there, sorry, is that I think that is an extremely important thing to do. These intersectionalities is not really, it inflates our numbers, right? So there is a pragmatic sense to it, to ally with other marginalized, oppressed communities. So it's a practical aspect. But I think more importantly, as it's a question of empathy, as members of the queer community, I think we have been disadvantaged, and consequently, we owe it to ourselves and our humanity and the humanity of everybody else who's equally oppressed to ally with them, not just for our rights, but also for their rights. Because till we do it together, I don't think we will be fully achieving the society we want to live in. We can't have a fair society where the queer community is valued and the other marginalized communities, the Dalits, women, are oppressed. It's possible to have a society like that, right? So it's important to move together.
Correct. So Sahil, for some reason, all the questions are to do with Section 377 and LGBTQ rights. There's another question from Sahil who's asking, since Section 377 was amended on September 6th, 2018, to what extent is the new law applied and helpful to members of the LGBTQ community? I think Ritu has dealt with it to some extent, but we can come back.
Saurabh, I think, would be a better person to answer.
Saurabh,
because he's dealing with a lot of cases. He's heard of a lot of cases that has happened post 377. Right, Saurabh?
Yes, well, that's true. I mean, it's a beginning of a change. There's a long way to go. I think there are battles to be fought. It has made a difference. Of course, I think more importantly than anything else, it's the fear of prosecution which has gone, and that has liberated a lot of activists and a lot of people to come out openly and express their sexuality. And there is, the obvious openness that happens and discussion. The more discussion that happens on this issue, that's important. One of the biggest problem of being in the closet was the fact that the issue itself has now come out of the closet at least, and now we're waiting for the rest of the members to follow. And this judgment has made it easier for people to come out, I think.
Right.
If I may just add one more thing there.
Yeah.
No, I was just
Go ahead,
saying
Ritu.
this this year especially has been an amazing year. For whatever strange reason, have people, done a lot of introspection or what it has happened during COVID time. But this year, personally, I mean, the judgment was passed in 2018, but I have found 2020 to be a very particular year where a lot more is being talked about it than it has ever been. It has ever, I mean, I've had more invitations to go and speak to school teachers, mothers, and school kids across the country, I can't explain to you. I've done, I think, Saurabh, you'll agree. I don't think you have talked so many times over various platforms as you've done this year on this subject.
It's an issue whose time has come, I think. That's basically what it is. Like the Me Too movement really, Namita, your chapter says in 2018, with the Me Too movement, right?
Correct.
I think there's a spark that is also set off the queer movement. And each of these movements, and you talked of intersectionality earlier, there are times for each movement. So the way the Black Lives Matter with George Floyd, we're waiting for a Dalit moment in India, possibly, for there to be so each of these has what triggers it. But the fact is, something has been triggered in the Indian consciousness, really. And therefore, I think the queer movement is here to stay.
Yeah. I hope so, because I know that the Me Too movement has caused a huge backlash, and any challenge to the patriarchy, wherever it comes from, is going to face resistance. All of us in the women's rights movement are facing this. Dalit women are facing this, where violence is routine, and we're not even begun those conversations. So. Yes, but I think the box is open, Pandora's box or whatever box you want to call it. And I think there's no going back. I think it's onward and forward. Thank you very much, all of you. Justice Lokur, your candid comments. I know I took you a little bit away from the book, but always frank and honest. Unafraid to speak your mind. Thank you so much for your perspective. Saurabh, thank you for bringing us all together with this remarkable book. Ritu, you are amazing, and you're not a fraud.
Namita, you are now honorary member.
And just
thank you. I shall wear that with great pride.
Yes.
That book. Back to JLF. Thank you for having us here, Sanjoy, but putting this together. Great effort. Thank you so much.
Namita Bhandare, Saurabh Kripal, Ritu Dalmia, Justice Madan Lokur, thank you so much. The takeaways, as Saurabh said, you have to time taking a case to court. The idea is to win. The idea is to bring about change. Justice Lokur very pointedly reminded us that the court has lurched to the conservative side. It's become far more closed. Justice Lokur, you were really the shining light for many of us who look to the Supreme Court for protection of personal rights. We do hope that will change again in the years to come. Saurabh, we do hope that you find a place in the court. More importantly, I think the book that you've written, every chapter needs a session. This has not been able to do justice to it, because every chapter has a story behind it, has a motivation, and as Namita said, those incidents that drove each chapter to make that difference, that is important, because the more we're able to tell that story, Ritu, your very story of bringing hope to those who know no hope. People like all of us are privileged, and Saurabh mentioned that a couple of times. But those people out there who have no access, neither to language nor to the networks that we are part of, what do? And we've seen that, be it in Hathras or so many of these other places. The lady in Madhya Pradesh where the court said you had to tie a rakhi because she had been raped. I mean, some of these judgments need to be absolutely revisited. But thank you all so much. It was
thank you, Sanjoy.
Brilliant and fascinating session. And I hope all of you watching out there enjoyed it. We're sorry we couldn't take all the questions because, as you saw, there was so much to talk about. But we do hope you'll be back at 8:30 p.m. for Brave New World, COVID and the Arts with Anand Padmanabhan, Shashi Tharoor, K.R. Meera, Kanishk Gupta, Marcus Dusotoy, Namita Gokhale, and Urvashi Butalia in conversation. It's a session which explores resilience and innovation. I'm using the word resilience again, and innovation from the arts to the isolation and extreme disruptions of the pandemic. Writers, artists, and book lovers speak of responding to unforeseen challenges and the creativity and solidarity that rose to the fore during these difficult times. This session was part of the Frankfurt Book Fair program, which was a digital program this year. Please also remember, we've got JLF Brave New World Voices of Faith, a new series. The next session is on Saturday, the 7th of November at 7:30 p.m. And that's with Ram Charitmanas, Then and Now, Pavan K. Varma and Pushpesh Pant in conversation. Pavan Varma's The Greatest Ode to Lord Ram, Tulsidas's Ram Charitmanas, has attempted to deconstruct Hinduism by analyzing the plurality and diversity that exists within its philosophical roots. This is being presented by the Kamini and Bindi Banga Family Trust. Also, just to remind you all, block your dates for JLF North America. This begins later this month or later this week. We have 4 editions starring Nobel laureates, Man Booker, and Pulitzer Prize winners. Eric Cornell, Ian Martel, Michael Sandel, William Callum McDaniel, Vijay Seshadri, Stephen Greenblatt, Vikram Chandra, Amish Tripathi, Ira Mukhoti, and so many others to discuss issues including the present ongoing American elections. Another state has just flipped, for those of you who may be interested, to Biden's side. Black Lives Matter, which we talked about just now a little while ago. Of course, environment, history, science, travel, nation and identity, fiction, and poetry. This is November 8th to 11th, November 15th to 18th, JLF Colorado, November 21st to 22nd, JLF Houston, November 23rd and 24th, JLF New York, and we conclude with JLF Toronto, November 27th to the 29th. Stay safe. See you back at 8:30.